Now, more than 5.5 million young people have signed up for the National Pathway Management Network since its inception in 2020. Nearly 2 million work opportunities have been created, with over 200,000 taken up between April and June this year. Let's speak about this and other attendant-related issues now with the Economist at the Stellenbosch Business School, Dr. Nthabiseng Moleko. Very good afternoon to you, Dr. Moleko. Thanks very much for your time. It's a pity because of the live broadcast we're having there of the mayor and his public meetings with residents who have been without water, many for more than a month. We've had to, I can't really give a more context to the story. But in a nutshell, you've heard today the Deputy Minister in the presidency saying that little initiative which they have has actually been helpful to many young people in the country, and they hope that is going to continue to grow. On the other hand, you had the government of the province of Gauteng saying with their Nasi Ispan is also making a bit of a difference. But of course, outside of these initiatives, there are people saying, but this is way too small. The impact is not really, in fact, is nowhere near what we need in order for us to be able to address the unemployment crisis in this country, especially among young people, which then begs the question, what is it exactly that we need to do? Because this small little initiative, important as they might be, making a difference as they probably do in the lives of many young people, they are nowhere near what we need to do to be able to turn the situation around.
A very good day to you. Thank you so much for having me. The reality is that we are within an economic crisis of low labor or employment intensity. The labor market has shown us that 32 years into democracy, we are unable to absorb the number of people that are entering the labor market to the extent that it needs, but also we have hindrances, whether it's in the education system, in the rollout of infrastructure, in the ability to localize industries so that we can create labor absorptive sectors and change the labor market outcomes. And I think that deliberate and very, I would say, we've got to reinforce that there is an economic crisis. We have to reinforce, therefore, the institutional response from both public and private, but mainly from a policy perspective. And I think that these initiatives that you're talking to are pointing us to the right direction. But whether the scale, right, and the urgency which is required is really at the back of it, this is the question we have to ask. So we really need a smarter response, a quicker response, and a massified response, because the scale of the problem is sitting at around 12.5 million unemployed. And so that type of a response requires urgency, and it requires a rapid response that reinforces changes within the economic structure.
But do you see that smarter, quicker response actually coming? And I'm asking this because only a couple of weeks ago, the Deputy President was told at Galaga State it was going to outline how the government is going to work towards increasing, jobs between now and 2030 by between 10 and 20%. The conversation hardly actually went there. We were talking today to both the minister in the presidency, but also the Deputy Minister of Labour, both of whom didn't quite have the kind of didn't inspire any confidence. In other words, give us something that said, perhaps someone is cutting through the noise and behind the scenes there's something happening. I won't speak about the Minister of Labour and Employment. She has completely disappeared from the scene. And it would seem that that center that the presidency is supposed to give and which is supposed to hold isn't there at all, which then brings me to someone that says, what do we do? What do you do? What do I do? What do we do where I'm working? What do you do at the university where you are? Are there still things we haven't leveraged on? Because this is a crisis, but saying it is a crisis without doing anything about it is not going to take anybody anywhere.
So what we need to do is the collaborative effort, because if we don't see, for an example, the Economic Council, I would argue, we have to put in place evidence-based policy solutions. We have to put in place and continue to lament what needs to be done so that you trigger responsiveness and also educate the nation. I think the first thing that I would argue and have been arguing and will continue to argue is that if there is a crisis, you need a center. You've spoken about that. What is the center? The center being at the helm. We had a COVID council when there was a health crisis globally. We have a local domestic economic crisis on the back of our own mismanagement of the economy, but also on external global economic factors. We know that there is impending tariffs that are going to affect agro industry, that are going to affect the auto sector. We're already seeing some of the value chain sectors shedding jobs. What therefore this requires is that South Africans, when they are dialoguing, when they are engaging in any sector and any space, we need to say there is an urgency for labor market reforms. We need to continue as academics to continue to propel that evidence-based labor market reforms require, therefore, that for us to increase employment intensity, we need to make sure that we target sectors like community services, transport. We need to make sure that we have public employment programs massified. We cannot stop to lament and to say that these are the solutions that we're not seeing go wide enough. Until we see the change, we have to continue to lament. And I think the ideation, the knowledge economy, the space where ideas are formed is where we can then begin to say from a strategic thrust, what are the new ideas that we need to implement so that we can begin to see a change? Well, I think the second aspect, yes, Will.
I was going to say, well, we are busy fighting about dialoguing before it even begins. You know that a few years ago, the president promised that all the key stakeholders, labor, organized business, civil society, the government are going to come together at NEDLAC and map out a social compact built within that would be ideas, but also commitments on how each one of us, the sacrifices that each one of those constituencies will have to make in order to move the country forward economically so that it creates the jobs. But none of that has happened.
And you're asking me as the president, Will? If I was the president, then you can hold me to account. And I think what you're saying
is... I'm just pointing it out.
Should we hold our leaders to account? Should we hold those at the helm of the economy to account? I absolutely would agree with you. Because one thing to make a promise, it's another thing to make it come to pass. I think the reality is this, and I think you've hit it spot on. We have spoken, we have lamented, we have spoken again. You are calling us for interviews, but the question is, where is the reinforcement for change and action? Who holds the power and who should be held responsible to promote labor absorption, to promote activity in productive sectors, to promote agricultural and other subsector economic activity? And I think that South Africans really have to introspect to say there are decisions that need to be made at a country level. And I think that those at the leadership level will definitely have to be taken to task and held to account to some of these promises that have been made and not yielded any outcome.
Dr. Moleko, let me thank you very much for your time and insights. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. Economist at Stellenbosch Business School, Dr. Nthabiseng Moleko.